Right, guys, I'm really excited to be here to host the first Chainlink panel event that we've done in Houston, Texas. We've done a lot of stuff in Austin. This is very, very, very exciting for me to be here and to welcome, I think, one of the most inspiring panels we've had in a while. So before I hand to them, I do want to make sure that everyone is aware that we are filming today's event. So if you'll notice, I did do my hair especially for the cameras. But no, I wanted to remind people that actually on the 28th and 29th of September, Chainlink is hosting our annual SmartCon conference, which is an industry-leading event in the crypto space for people working, networking, or trying to develop in the crypto and smart contract space. So I highly recommend that you look at some of the material here today, you look online and think about coming along. It is in the heart of New York City, and again, I said at the end of September, the 28th and 29th. So, my name is Ben. I'm going to be your host for tonight. I'm part of the advocate program for Chainlink. I'm going to let each panelist now introduce themselves. So, starting here.
Great. My name is Max Melcher. I'm a go-to-market lead for a solution at Chainlink called Proof of Reserve. And what we do is we verify the reserve backing a lot of tokenized assets, so like real-world assets like stablecoins, wrapped assets like WBTC, and also tokenized commodities. So, yeah.
Hi. My name is Jimmy Su. I'm the co-founder of Pocket Worlds. We make Highrise and Eversky, which are two virtual worlds, also known as metaverses. I think we're one of the OGs in this space. We started in 2013. And Highrise now has, I think, north of 20 million users, and Everskies is a top 10 app in the App Store.
Greg Wong, and I'm the CEO of Teller Finance. We're essentially the open sea for lending markets. We allow anyone to be able to launch their own lending markets within a few minutes, and they can source liquidity through that.
Howdy, I'm Evan Van Ness. I have a newsletter called Week in Ethereum News, and I run a little venture fund called Starbloom Ventures.
Thank you very much. Well, welcome. I think I'll start with an easy one for you, okay? And we'll come back the other way. We'll start with Evan. So right now, obviously, the market's down. All the excitement, all of the hype is gone. So what do you think is some of the key Web3 benefits now that all of the excitement and the noise is gone? What is some of the core functionality that you can still see shining through in today's market?
Yeah, well, so I was just in Argentina, and I have a lot of ties to Argentina. If you want to talk about a place that has Web3 adoption, I mean, it is there. Of course, sometimes it's on centralized apps. So a lot of people own DAI, but they own it on a centralized app. And honestly, the reason why they own it is because it's a way to get around capital controls. But I think it's pretty cypherpunk of them to get around the corrupt, unjust government. So yeah, I'm still pretty bullish on people that, the Argentines have more faith and religious faith in the U.S. dollar than Americans do, but I'm super bullish on just that as a use case and people doing that. I'm perpetually going to be excited by that because real people middle class, working class family members of mine use it and are excited about it, and the challenge of moving them to hosting their own keys and to actually using actual DeFi apps is still there, but it's happening. And a little fun fact I saw is that there are more. It's not even close. There are more people that own crypto in Argentina than own equities in Argentina. So crypto is much more seen as something that you would invest in than stocks. I don't know. I think Gary Gensler maybe should learn from that, since he was telling us to put our money in a bank account when it was earning 0.1% while inflation was 8%. But yeah, I'll stop there. I'm excited about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's ownership and community. I think that everyone's heard the phrase in this room of not your keys, not your coins. And I think that it resonates deeply with the ethos of this community, which is making sure that everyone has skin in the game. There's a different buy-in. And as a result, you have these communities form, and everyone in this room, you feel the energy when you go to the crypto conferences, especially like in the bull market, the bear market now. You have it where people are dedicated to this space and they want to build, they want to participate.
I think for us, the value proposition is pretty obvious. When we started in 2013, our core business model revolved around digital assets and digital assets having value. And Web3 really is a multiplier on top of that. So for us, inside of our world, so far, as a Web2 company, we already have these clothes, furniture, environments, pets that people buy and sell and trade for thousands of dollars. And then now moving to Web3, it's just more liquidity and more composability for the things that you already own.
Yeah, I agree with Evan. Actually, the accessibility, I think globally is huge. I think the last cycle brought a lot more of that. But I also think awareness today, even the United States, I think that has increased dramatically. Even if it is on a centralized exchange, people are getting more exposure to crypto. And I think that exposure is good. It introduces them to the concepts. People, even my parents who are here today, they're 60 and they have purchased crypto. And I think this last wave brought in a lot of new people in, both old and young. And I think that's all positive for the space.
Doxed. Just kidding.
Did you talk your parents into buying crypto? Did you twist their arm a little bit, or is that
I think
organic?
We talked about central banking. We talked about inflation. I think if you start to connect the dots, they may have found some interest themselves.
I like that. Out of interest, it's down the front. Hello, are these the parents? No? Where are your parents are here? At the back. Oh, hello. Sorry. I assumed wrong. Welcome. So you mentioned accessibility. I think a lot of criticism gets thrown at Web3 and Web3 dApps, for example, on user experience. What do you think are key areas that have improved in the last 12 months?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I think it's a good question because a lot of times people are saying, hey, this is what needs to be done to onboard the next wave. And we don't often look back and say, hey, here's what we did a really good job of last year. And personally, I remember last year I'd Google, questions I had, and it would be, maybe I'm more curious about how synthetics works. And the top 10 videos were all price predictions 2025, and it wasn't helpful. And I think one of the things we've really seen growth in the space is the developer relations and documentation. There are great YouTube influencers like Patrick Collins who've gone above and beyond to create resources for developers that are going through boot camps to learn how to program in Solidity and get onboarded. So I think developer relations and onboarding developers has really improved over the last year, and it's worth noting.
So I think for us, one of the fundamental things that we've always focused on is accessibility. And our philosophy is, we could, since we are in the business of metaverses and VR is obviously a big thing, we could make a VR experience. But we chose to go instead to mobile in the beginning because we thought mobile was more accessible. There's a lot more people on mobile. And VR, I think even today, it's just the adoption is not quite there. I think over the last year, what I've seen is that Web3 in the crypto community has really adopted that philosophy as well. I think people have started to really realize that in order to fully go mainstream, to really reach the world, you have to think beyond what really people in this room is comfortable with. How do you create a product? How do you create a wallet even that someone can pick up and not even have to know what an address is, what a blockchain is? They can just use it. I think we've made a lot of progress in the last 12 months.
Yeah, I actually agree a lot with that accessibility. And I like to take the example of NFTs, I think. We even have a Pudgy Penguin shirt over here. And we look back at last year, it's the accessibility with allowing the attention to be grabbed from the mainstream through cultural relevance. You have it where there are huge barriers to entry prior to all that, where you're looking at these DeFi apps and saying, hey, you have to do over-collateralization. You have to do, with DeFi Summer, all this yield farming. And this is complicated stuff, especially for people who don't even know how to use a MetaMask wallet. And so you have the surge of NFTs, which allowed people to come in and say, hey, let me get a piece of this. And let me just get my feet wet. And if I'm continuing to be interested in crypto, let me dive deeper.
Well, it would be boring if I agreed, right? So I'll disagree. Yeah, I actually don't really feel like it's improved that much in the last 12 months. My feeling about how crypto gets adopted is that people, for better and for worse, get involved in this space often because they think they can get rich quick. And, often then they stick around because like maybe they learn some, self-sovereignty values, some whatever it is that gets them to stick around. Me personally, when I think about like key management, I still feel like it's a little bit unsolved. Like there's multi-sigs that are better, like mostly just because they've been around, so they've been a little bit more hardened. Ledger sucks, right? It's like sorry, but like hardware wallets, like they're still really bad. My friends at Grid Plus, like the Lattice One is like a cool hardware wallet that is like way better than Ledger. But their hardware wallet is out of stock because they can't produce enough to keep up with the demand, and it's like $350 or something. So I don't know. I think they've improved on key management, but outside of that, I don't know. These things take time just because like these are technological solutions that like need some time to be hardened before I would like tell my Argentine family to put their entire crypto net worth into one of these things. Like I don't know. Like whenever people tell me they get into the space, I feel nervous because if the money is meaningful to them, I feel like I need to have to steer them into better key management, and it's non-trivial, shall we say.
Is there any functionality coming that you think is going to be key? If nothing's improved drastically in the last 12 months, what is that one piece you're looking to be launched? What dare I say, Ethereum 2.0? Or is that, in your opinion, maybe not as groundbreaking as the market is hyping it up to be?
Wait, sorry, was this about ETH roadmap or about?
Just in general, what do you think is a key piece of functionality that is coming that you're excited to see in the space?
Got it, yeah. Well, of course, the merge is happening in 3 weeks, which I think is a seminal moment for crypto. I think it is as important as the chain launch of Bitcoin or Ethereum. It's the moment when we reduce the energy footprint of blockchain forever by a factor of, hold on, let me do some math in my head. 10,000, 1,000, I forget.
For those that don't know, can you briefly touch on what the merge is?
Yeah, so there's this chain, this proof of stake chain that went live in December 2020 that has been running in production since then, so almost 2 years. It is a proof of stake chain that is currently not really being used for anything except for coming to consensus about the state of itself. So Ethereum currently has 2 chains. There's the mainnet proof of work chain that we all know and occasionally love when gas fees aren't really expensive. So we are going to basically swap out the proof of work part and then use the proof of stake chain to come to consensus on all the transactions happening on the proof of work chain. So they will basically be merged, hence the name. Danny Ryan picked the name. I'm still a little salty about that because I tried to make it become turning off proof of work instead of the merge, but he won. So it's called the merge. I don't know. It still hurts me a little bit to say it, honestly. I'm excited about that. I mean, I think that's like a huge thing. But that's like so close, like 3 weeks away, that like I'm personally more excited about roll-ups really becoming a thing. Basically we have no good decentralized, really cheap platform right now, and I think roll-ups are going to be that. And then in the next fork after the merge, we're going to cut the price of transactions on these roll-ups. So right now gas fees are relatively cheap. It costs, I don't know, let's say 30 cents to do a transaction on a roll-up, and we should be cutting that down to under a cent at current gas prices, which probably won't stay this low. But still, transactions under a cent that should keep Vitalik's famous maxim of the internet of money can't cost 5 cents a transaction. So I think we're actually going to get there in, I don't know, 6 to 9 months. Predicting the future is pretty hard, but let's say 6 to 9 months.
Just to kind of respond to that original point that you were making about, I guess, the accessibility not really improving in the last 12 months. I think from an application developer perspective, our end goal is to create a system where a user can come in, interact with Web3 and blockchain, and not even know that they're touching it. And I think to that end, with Fireblocks, Magic Wallet, Web3 Auth, these are all kind of third-party wallet solutions that have sprung up, maybe not so Fireblocks, that have sprung up over the last 12 months that make that a possibility, where the experience can function somewhat like Google Sign-In, where with email and password, a user can have access to all of Web3 and have no idea that they're touching any of it. And I think that is a pretty, from our perspective, from an application developer perspective, it's pretty big breakthrough in terms of accessibility.
I'd say I'm pretty hyped for that.
What do you think is the main route into, for someone that's completely new to it, route into Web3? Do you think it's centralized exchanges, and that's where the main work to improve adoption is, or is it NFTs?
So for me, I think, so as a concrete example, for Highrise, our core audience is 17 to 24-year-old female. And this is an audience that is not really tech savvy. They have no idea what blockchain is. And for them, all they care about is having that really cool pet in that virtual world that nobody else has, that has value, because it's very coveted, and they want to keep it, and they want to feel like it's theirs, and it's unique. And I think that is a great entry point, because with Web3, we can now move that, essentially that guarantee that this pet is unique, from our database into a public ledger that make it a lot more substantial. And I think that promise that this thing now is actually a lot more, has a lot more value that you actually own, and you can actually take it to a marketplace and show it off, or another app, and it's composable and all of that. I think that has a lot of value. I think that has value more so than I am buying this token to invest because I want to make money. I think at the end of the day, that's probably still going to be a pretty small portion of people. Whereas the people that actually use the internet that can benefit from digital assets ownership is going to be much bigger than that investor community.
Yeah, I agree with you. In your example, the demographic, the interest. I think people are going to get into Web3 because of an interest they have. So the demographic you just described may not be interested in going on Aave and taking out a loan, right? They may not be interested in participating in DeFi. But maybe you're into gaming, and maybe when you unlock a loot box, you want to know that you had an equal chance of getting a certain drop. So you get into DeFi, or you get into NFTs because of gaming. Maybe you are interested in trading derivatives, and that's your gateway into using synthetics or a derivative platform on the blockchain. So I think everybody's entry point is going to be different, and I think getting people interested in what they're inherently interested in and giving them the Web3 path is probably the best way to keep people actually interested in using the platform.
I like it. I want to touch briefly on anonymous teams, but before I do that, if I show of hands, who has a wallet, crypto wallet in the room? Okay, everyone. No surprise. What about NFTs? Does anyone not have or own an NFT currently? Okay, about half. Interesting. I think a big part of NFT and considering NFTs for people that are new to the space is having a completely anonymous team or a team you can look up. Do you think that's going to change over the next 12 months? And how do you, as someone who's developing in this space, get comfortable working with an anonymously run protocol where you can't find the person at the end of the day?
Yeah, I don't think identity should be a proxy for trust. So just because you know who the team is, I think the last several months have shown us that, people can still be left, without certain repercussions for their actions. So just knowing who the project is doesn't guarantee anything. And I think especially timely to point out right now, I probably didn't have a strong opinion in the past. I've worked with Docs teams and Anonymous, but there was a developer who recently was reprimanded for writing open source software in Europe, and I think he may be still in custody. So I think my opinion on this may change. It's just my own opinion, and I think the other developers will look at that and make decisions about publicizing their identity because of what happened, and that's a consequence. So
I think coming from kind of the more traditional Web2 world, I'm more of a pragmatist rather than an idealist. I think pragmatically speaking, it is, to your point, trust. Having that non-anonymous team, it just inherently has more trust to me.
Yeah. I think as the space got started, we look back at like Satoshi, and I mean, publicly, no one knows who he is still. And I think it was important to support the ethos of the space in the beginning, but as we've started to mature, the ability to know who that team is, to have that team docs is even more important. It goes back to what they've been saying, it's reputation. And being able to, although someone might carry a pseudo-anonymous handle, name, if that person has a huge reputation, I'd say maybe there's grounds to have someone who is anon, but really I would support that we have people who are doxxed because reputation is everything and it keeps people accountable.
Yeah, there are a lot of people with bunny profile pictures on the web who I trust a lot more than Do Kwon. So, yeah, I mean, identity is a spectrum. I mean, there's people that are, they go to conferences, they just don't use their I think Vitalik said lately, like, people should stop calling it their real name. You should start calling it your legal name. They show up at conferences, but they use their pseudonym, or they, I don't know. Some people even wear a mask. I saw recently at a conference. That was a little interesting. But yeah, I mean, it is a little bit of a spectrum there, more than perhaps is seen at first blush. You can obviously like build up a lot of reputation as a pseudonym. There's somebody who's done that that I've known for like 15 years, who I have a lot of respect for. That's Hazu, works for Paradigm now. So I assume that Paradigm knows what his legal name is. But yeah, I don't know. The early days of the space, back in 2014, I was convinced that most Ethereum app developers would be anonymous and they would publish their code on GitHub, and that was it. And until recently, that seemed sort of paranoid. But then we have the amateur hour of OFAC, censoring Tornado Cash. They have clearly no idea what they're doing. Some bureaucrat told them what to do, and they did it. They obviously, it's obviously unconstitutional and will be struck down. But in the meantime, we've seen that government is not always very intelligent about their rulemaking, and I think it will cause people to consider how they, develop code on the internet.
As metaverse technology gets more developed and it's possible to have some of these conferences completely virtually as your NFT, can you see a time where people spend more time as their chosen NFT name, character, Web3 personality than they do their legal personality? Or do you think it's always going to be majority legal name and then dipping in and out of the Web3 space?
I actually think we're going to have a mix. I mean, we can even look at influencers who came up in the recent years, with like G Money, and he has a huge following. If you attend an event, you know who G Money looks like, and you will know his name. But over virtually, if you've never met him, you're just going to see a ape overlaid on his face.
Evan or Max?
Yeah, the early days of the internet, a lot of it was finding weird ways to have community. One of them in the early 90s, after, sort of same time as bulletin boards, but was email lists. There was this whistleblower from Twitter. He goes by Mudge. I saw a picture today of him testifying before Congress like 20-some years ago. I think it was like the mid-90s. And all of them were using their hacker name. It's like they were testifying in like the Senate House or the Senate, I don't know. But they all had like Mudge, Kingpin, like whatever the other guy's name was.
Black cards in front of them.
Yeah. And it really made me laugh. So, I don't know. I mean, I think there's on the internet, nobody knows that you're a dog or whatever. I mean, people like to explore different personalities. And, I think that's probably going to be increasingly more of a thing. Who knows? I mean, Second Life, it was a big thing to pretend to be somebody completely different than you were. But then Second Life died too. So I don't know.
So I think this whole thing is kind of a pendulum. Like you said, when the internet first started, it was very anonymous. And then we got to the point of Web 2.0, which is when Facebook came in and gave identity to the internet, and people felt safe. I think before Web 2.0, I don't know if folks remember, but you would never put your credit card on your computer online. The automatic assumption was people just steal your information. But then Facebook came in, Amazon came in, and now everyone's identity, their physical identity is tied to their online identity, and now web is something that anyone can use. And I think from there, really from early days of the internet to Web 2.0 was the pendulum swing all the way to one direction. And then in the last, I would say probably 5 years, people have gotten really tired of being the real identities online. It's very constricting. And then that's when really Bitmoji, Snapchat started like kicking off this thing where you don't have to use your profile picture as your online identity. So then that was really the tip of the spear, swing the pendulum backwards. So now I think with Web3, we're in this phase of the pendulum back into this pseudo or anonymous stage, whereas I think in 5-10 years from now, it'll swing back into that real identity direction again.
Do you think people will start working, having contracts, employment completely under a pseudonym? Because that's possible now, right?
It's possible, but again, I think as we evolve, it's going to teeter back and forth. I don't think we're going to go all the way to anonymous.
I mean, you could say that there are plenty of people in Web3 right now that are working for DAOs that are, completely, they get paid USDC or DAI on chain, and nobody knows what their identity is. So, I mean, it's already possible for sure, and I think often it's because they're from some country that they, need the anonymity, but it's a thing.
So stepping away from the anonymous side of things, question I like to ask, I think, is a really good measure of how long you've been in the space. What's one thing you wish you could have told yourself when you were starting out to do differently between when you first started in Web3 and then now? Start with Max.
That's a good question. I think, if I look at my view when I entered the space, there's a popular meme on the internet. It's like, it's happening tonight. And I think my view was that a lot of development was going to come very quickly and adoption would be tomorrow. And I think, Evan said very early, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And a lot of these things we're still improving. We're not all the way there yet with, I think that mindset going in, I operated on a sprint mode, trying to work as many hours in the day as possible. And I think just resetting and realizing that it's going to be a slow path forward and upwards, but worthwhile in my opinion.
I think for me, so we started looking into Web3 around 2018. I think that was the ICO craze. And I think if I were to tell myself back then, it would be, it's not quite ready. I think it's not quite, the technology is great. I think the promise is amazing, but it's not quite ready for what we do, which is more mainstream adoption. But the other thing is, I would tell myself, is that the space moves incredibly, incredibly fast. That who knows, in 6 months from now, right now we're in the middle of 2022, 2023, it might be ready. Don't know. I think right now we're just on the cusp.
Yeah, I'd say work on your foundation. There is, with the space moving super fast, there's a lot of noise, and being able to distill that down to what the actual signal is extremely important. You're going to be able to see like what matters and be able to keep the focus on the target, and also listen to the users.
Yeah, the first thing I would tell myself is that proof of work is going to be around for a long time. And I would be pretty disheartened by that, I think. But hey, we're 3 weeks away from turning it off, so we got that going for us. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the other thing I would tell myself, which maybe doesn't interest anyone else, is the scams are going to be even worse than happened in like the original .com revolution, and that's just part of it. And you sort of have to take the good with the bad, and you don't have to get so bothered by how many scammers are pulling out so much money. But yeah, I don't know. I'm still pretty bothered by it.
Scammers is definitely a big challenge for the space. What do you see personally for you and your team as the biggest challenge you have to overcome in the next year or two? Go back the other way, Evan.
Yeah, don't have a good answer for this because I run a venture fund, so I have to find game-changing investments that revolutionize the space, or I fail. So no pressure.
For us, it's a teller. It's really just listening to the users. We're in this phase right now where we built out the protocol. We have this infrastructure, and we're having people come in and launch a ton of markets off of us. But it's really keeping our ear close to the user and saying, well, what do you really need to continue reducing this friction in the UX and being able to bring in actual feature sets that matter?
I think our next big challenge is figuring out how do we onboard 20 million people onto Web3. So far, we've done it with 10,000. We kind of dipped our toes into NFTs, but that was very much a small project. And now we've got this massive horde of high-rise users and EverSky's users that don't really know how to navigate. So how do we build the right experience, the right UX, so then they don't have to learn?
I think people are very worried about the current thing, and so when there's scams and DeFi protocols that are operating in manners which should be very clear that they're scams, it's the top of mind, and infrastructure and protection against that is on everyone's mind. But time passes and people forget or seem to go back to these protocols or use certain tokens that maybe don't have certain protections. And I think reinforcing the lessons we've learned the hard way and keeping that top of mind. And really building off of that is crucial to establish and keep going.
Nice. So before I turn it over to the audience for some questions, I have a final request, if you will. What is the biggest prediction you have for the space in the coming year, whether that be from a legislation point of view or from functionality, or whether it be the market turning back? What is something really bold if you're like, if I'm just going to say best case scenario, worst case scenario, what's the boldest prediction you want to put out there?
I don't know if it's a bold prediction. Jimmy will like it. It's a bit of a leading indicator as a lot of VC money is going into blockchain gaming right now. I think there's a lot of utility for DeFi tools for people in countries like Argentina. But I think in the United States, one of the big value propositions can be gaming moving into the future. So I think gaming is going to be large. I think maybe gambling potentially. Right now, a lot of these online services operate in a black box. And I think gaming, my bold prediction is next year, that's really going to be large.
So my prediction is a little bit longer term, I think. Blockchain and Web3, I think, is really just a collection of private money issued in different tokens, different currencies. But there's one big public money that we all use, which is USD, the US dollar. And I think it's inevitable for the US government to move into digital currencies with CBDC, central bank digital currency. China's already testing theirs. And I think ultimately when that happens, that will be the internet moment where everybody can just use this without worrying about all these different networks and technologies. We'll have one thing. If you think of the CBDC, the US central bank CBDC as the main highway, that's the internet backbone. All the private money networks, the current blockchains that we use, will be kind of the side roads that you can also use. But the main thing, the traffic, is going to be on that CBDC network.
Yeah, I think if that with that bold claim, Jimmy, I'd like to be able to see that happen, because with that, DeFi would explode, and it'd be good for Teller. And
Explode in a good way, or
in a great way. In a great way. I think there would be a huge amount of users coming into the space, just a huge amount of user adoption. And I think that like over this next year, specifically within DeFi, we're going to see additional institutions come in, that additional fintechs come in, and really try to figure out how do they utilize Web3.
Yeah, so this will be like the fourth answer where I talk about the merge. I think in the next 3 weeks when we turn off proof of work, we will see that proof of work is obsolete, and that it will quickly become obvious because flows determine the value of things in the space, and the flows are going to fundamentally change. And so in the next 12 months, I think we'll see the flippening. How was that?
Do you have any concerns about the merge and it switching the proof of stake? One concern that was raised on a previous panel was that the vast majority of Ethereum tokens are held at centralized exchanges, who technically have to report to some kind of government, so they would have the majority of the stake for proof of stake. Do you think that's a genuine concern, or?
No. I mean, the fundamental properties of proof of stake are much better in terms of security. And one reason is, like if you look at hash power, like I think 25% of hash power on Bitcoin right now is American public companies. Given selfish mining attacks, like basically we're already near to the point where like the U.S. government could decide to tell Bitcoin what to do, like through miners. The difference, like, you can go back to Andreas Antonopoulos, published a video years ago that basically said, like, the reason why people won't 51% attack is because if they do that in proof of work, then we'll just change the mining algorithm. And, that's useful, but it's difficult. The difference is that in Ethereum, we can literally just take their mining farms and burn them down without any actual incendiary things by just slashing their stake. So if people decide that, like, if governments or centralized exchanges decide that they want to try to censor, like, I think they will quickly realize that it's not in their best interest, because Coinbase, if they decide they want to like censor, they will lose their they'll get slashed. So given that they have a duty both to their clients and to their shareholders, I think that their choice will be to exit the staking business or to get slashed. I think it's pretty obvious which one they're going to pick. Brian Armstrong even tweeted out that, if this was the pick, obviously, Coinbase would have to exit the staking business. So yeah, I'm not particularly worried about that. And by the way, Brian Armstrong went to Rice, so there's the Houston connection right there.
I want to say, Evan, you said the flippening. I'm not sure everybody knows what that is. Do you want to define that?
That is Ethereum dethroning Bitcoin forever on the top of the market cap charts.
How likely do you think that is?
Oh, well, you told me to make a prediction, so I made a prediction. Yeah, in the next year, predicting the future is hard. So one thing about, proof of work is that, you need a large amount of money coming in to the space every single day in order to keep the price the same, right? So I haven't done the math on it recently. Obviously, it changes with what the price of Bitcoin or ETH is on any given day. But the last I checked, it was something like $20 million for both Bitcoin and Ethereum. So you needed $20 million of currency coming in every day in order to keep the price just the same. Basically, that is no longer, it's going to be the opposite after proof of work, after the merge, and we turn off proof of work because, sorry, I'm figuring out how many layers of abstraction I should mention here. But basically, like, because proof of stake has much lower issuance, it'll be the opposite, which is that Ethereum can withstand something like a few $1 million worth of ETH being sold every day, and still the price will stay the same. So like fundamentally, I think even if you ignore the value of memes and narratives and all that, and institutions buying ETH because now it's like a environmentally friendly thing, whereas obviously proof of work is not. Just fundamentally, the flows are going to be so powerful over the long run that I think it's the flippening is inevitable.
Excellent answer, thanks. So I'm going to open up to the floor. We have a microphone at the back. Does anyone want to ask the first question of the panelists? Yeah, we've got to come down the front here.
Yeah, my name's Charles. Anyways, my first question, or my only question I had really is, does the CBDC, or is central bank, digital currency, does that, is that at odds with the sovereignty, right, component that we were discussing about Web3?
The short answer is yes. I think that even bringing up CBDC in kind of in the presence of a lot of Web3 blockchain folks is pretty controversial, because what CBDCs typically do, obviously there's a lot of advantages, but the disadvantage is you lose the privacy component because it's no longer decentralized. It is fundamentally centralized, and it's controlled by one entity, and that entity is the US government. So you have to, I guess, have faith in that. But I guess at the end of the day, the question is, are you a pragmatist, in which case you're advocating for the technology, or are you more of an idealist and you're trying to champion whatever political thing, whether it's about freedom or decentralization?
So I have a differing view. So I was in Switzerland to speak at a Bank of International Settlements conference, I don't know, in March maybe. I had to dress up. It was like the only time I've worn pants for a while. Yeah, so I talked to a bunch of central bankers. The BIS gets it. So when we talk about CBDC, the first challenge is to like define what we mean. So central banks already have digital currency, right? Like that's a thing. It exists. So if you're the Fed or whoever it is, you can issue, you already, like, money is easy. They create it every day digitally. Now, if they want to like do it on a blockchain, then they have to decide what they're going to do. So what are they going to do? Create their own chain? Well, that's like, like the Fed already exists. Like, there already are these systems. So the question is like, what are they going to issue it on? I don't think it's going to be easy for them, because when they, the Fed came out with a report on, CBDCs a while back, and of course they said things like, we want it to be private, but we also want it to be transparent. Okay, yeah, well, I'd also like to have my cake and eat it too. As government reports tend to do, I mean, they come out with a wish list of things that are diametrically opposed. So, like, if they are going to do these things, it eventually, like, there is only, like, in my view, really one credibly neutral system in the world, and that's Ethereum. And I mean, maybe Bitcoin, but I mean, no government's ever going to do anything on Bitcoin. One, because it's almost impossible. Two, because, like, proof of work, and energy waste. So I think, like, in the end, like, I think we will see central bankers issuing tokens on Ethereum. We're really not that far off. I've talked to them. They have plans for things in the future. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, like, proof of concepts and things that they're going to try it out and see if it works on, a small scale, and, see what, the prevailing political winds happen. And, I don't know, there is usage, or there are reasons why certain nation states would want to do it more than others. And so I think that, like, you will probably see some nations try to put things on a blockchain. It might not be the Swiss. In fact, I caused a little furor because I said something about Argentines wanting the ability to buy Swiss francs, and there were central bankers from all over the world, but maybe half the room was Swiss central bankers, and you could hear them all go, because apparently, what I didn't know is that the Swiss are really worried about there being too much demand for the Swiss franc, anyway, oops. But it was fun and interesting, and they also have the 1,000 Swiss franc note too, though, so they also do stimulate demand for the franc in some ways as well. And so I think that that there will be plenty of nations that will decide it's in their best interest.
I think just one more thing to add to that is I don't know if it's that far off in terms of the challenge, because there's actually, aside from the Chinese CBDC, there's already a form of kind of a central digital currency that we all are pretty familiar with, and that's Apple Pay. Apple Pay fundamentally is basically a blockchain that's secured by the secure enclave, the chip on your phone. And under the hood, it's basically a ledger, and they're using that to track who owns what. I think taking that a step further, owned by a central bank, that's the Fed, or the US Treasury, and making it smart so it can run code is certainly been done by the Chinese, and I think the US government is seriously considering it.
Can we explore, you mentioned the settlements, the payment side of things, and I think this gets maybe overlooked a lot, but every country has their own settlement systems, right? We have FedWire, chips, all sorts in the US, and so on and so on. Do you see a world in which all of that becomes redundant and we move to the transmission of value through a crypto network? So say Swift launches one, and it becomes the overarching way to transfer funds. Given the amount of technology that's out there today, it's not impossible to think that we could transfer all funds via apps, payment apps. I mean, we've got Cash App and Venmo here, and there's all sorts of other stuff around the world. If all of that was linked through one crypto-based consensus platform that Swift ran, for example, the international payment network, can you see all these different networks moving to that and falling away, or is that just not in the best interests of some of the central banks you've spoken to, or from your experience, do you think that's just too grand an idea for it to actually happen?
No, I think it's absolutely inevitable. In the same way that, like back in the 90s, when people were talking about commerce happening on the internet, like people laughed and thought it was ridiculous. I mean, I think the march of history is inevitable. Like I'm not like a utopian or anything like that. Like that's crazy. And there's some of those people in the Ethereum space. Like a lot of them will be Swift adapting or something like that. Like it's the existing institutions largely that will figure that many of these will figure these things out, but definitely not everything. I mean, like as we saw, like with the internet, like some people made the jump and some corporations didn't. So Walmart still exists and Walmart.com is still a big thing, but like look at all the retailers that are not here anymore. And I kind of miss some of those. Can't go to Kmart anymore.
Yeah, difficult to predict the future, I think. When you look in your bank account, you don't look and think, Wells Fargo US dollars, here's the amount I have, or Chase US dollars. We've done a really good job abstracting that away. It's very fungible, and you just see US dollars. You can transfer those to friends. We don't have that right now. USDC on Harmony is not USDC on Ethereum. So I think it's possible everybody centers around a system like Swift, but it's just as likely that interoperability gets better and there's multiple platforms that you can compose and operate with.
Thank you. Are there more questions in the room? Yeah, at the back.
Hi, my name is Bryce, and I had a question about a statement earlier made about rollups, or actually a series of questions. First is is this about ZK rollups? And then how much of the developer community could you see is being leaning towards this versus other solutions like sidechains? And what about the progress being made towards rollups makes you say it will be widely implemented in 6 to 9 months?
Yeah, okay. So rollups, I guess the fundamental reason why rollups are better than sidechains is that sidechain bridges are insanely insecure. So people talk about like, yeah, I bridge my thing over from here to there. What you're actually doing is you're sticking your asset into some code on the blockchain where you have it, and then they're unlocking it on the other blockchain, the receiving blockchain, based on some whatever it is. Usually, in this case, it is a multi-sig. So it is a 4 of 7 or something like that, signers where 4 people have to agree, and then they can steal all the money that's in the bridge. This doesn't even get into like some of the economic realities which are different, right? This is literally just the key management aspect of it. We saw Ronin get hacked for $500 million, a couple months ago, and this exact problem. Like multi-sigs are really, bad solutions. It's risky. You don't want to be having your money in bridges in general. I don't even think it's my contention. I think it's like the history of the last year has shown us that bridges are insanely insecure. So the reason why rollups are better is that with rollups, you put the data on chain of the transactions. So instead of like trusting, a 4 of 7 multi-sig or whatever. By the way, Avalanche does like basically the same thing, except they use SGX, which is like such a broken technology that even Intel deprecated it, and they have like $10 billion bridged in their SGX sidechain bridge, which is like fundamentally insane. Kind of characteristic of those people, unfortunately. So rollups, what they do is they put their data on chain, right? So I make a transaction on a rollup, and the data goes on Ethereum, and it is there. And then so fundamentally the security properties with a mature rollup is the same as using Ethereum. So I feel like I could go on here for like 20 minutes, so I feel like I should stop there because I've already like yammered a lot about it. Maybe we should talk about this later, or do you want to like ask follow-up, or somebody else can jump in, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think maybe into prompt too, like the rollups today are largely optimistic with optimism and arbitrum. And so I think the withdrawal time coming down back to L1 is a week for someone to publish a fraud proof and essentially say, something's not correct here. But the promise of what's coming soon with ZK Sync, Starknet, and others, it's not going to be optimistic in nature where someone needs to disprove it. It can be more atomic and just based off logic. That's promising.
Thanks. Okay, we've got time for the last question in the room if anyone has one. All right.
If you ask a question, though, we can't get pizza until we're done answering questions.
On that note, we'll rush to the pizza. Look, I want to say thank you for all you guys coming, but let's give the panel a round of applause. Thank you very much. We'll now break for the drinks and pizza, and please feel free to come up and ask questions. Maybe too scared to ask.